All right, what's going on, everyone out there on YouTube, NES Ruler, and welcome to a brand new series that I'm going to attempt to do. This is going to be different than what I usually do on this channel. If you guys know me, I'm usually a visual-based medium here on YouTube, and if you guys have been following me, you remember that I used to be on the 22 Shots of Moods and Horror podcast, and on that show, we would do a What We Watch segment where we would talk about the films that we watch every week. And I really miss doing that kind of a segment on the show every week because, it not only forced me to watch films and kept me active and watching stuff, but it also allowed me to talk about my thoughts on some things. And if you guys know, I'm more of a text-based analysis kind of a person. I really don't succeed that well in talking about things right off the top of my head. I really have to sit down and think about things. I wrote a lot when I was in film school and things like that. So I kind of got to the point where I was just really thinking about what I was typing in my mind before I actually typed it. And with being visual and audio based, you really had to think about stuff right on the top of your head. And most of the time, I wouldn't come up with the most interesting kind of things to say. But, as I got more and more into the show and I did more and more of these segments, I got better at talking and better at, reviewing films and things like that. And since then, I feel like I kind of lost that edge that I had when I was on the show. But unfortunately, because now I'm working on movies and TV and commercials, I really don't have that much time anymore to be on the show. And I really don't have that much time anymore to watch stuff. So I figured this is probably the best way for me to keep up on my, my audio skills and talking and things like that, while at the same time watching films and remaining active and watching and talking about films. And on top of that, I really don't have that much time anymore to make, 8 videos a week talking about films that I've watched. So I figured, we would try and do this, make one concrete audio podcast type of a show with B-roll and things like that, similar to Bloody Bits. If you guys know Jason from Horrorphilia, he does a similar show where he talks about all the releases that have come out in the last few weeks, and he talks about them and things like that. I'm going to attempt to do that and add some B-roll and make it visual in some sort, so you're just not looking at a banner. So I hope you guys like this type of a review, type of a show. I haven't came up with a name yet, but I'm thinking about it. Let me know if you guys like this. If you do, maybe I'll keep going. But if you don't, maybe I'll just go back to my old review style. But, like I said, I'm just trying to do something new and different on the channel. So what we're going to be talking about today is some films. And one of these films is part of this new line that Olive is releasing. It's called Olive Signature. And if you guys know Olive, they basically release films with bare bones, nothing on there, no features, usually not new transfers and things like that. They usually just find a high-def transfer that's already exists to some of these films that they own the rights to, and they release these films. So now Olive is trying to get into a more premium type of a packaging with this Olive Signature line. And what they're doing is they're going back into their vault and into the library and getting films that they've already released on Blu-ray and making them premium, giving them new transfers and giving them new features and things like that. So I think there's been 4 films that have come out so far in this line. Today I'm going to be talking about one of these films. It's a Western from 1966. It's called Night of the Grizzly, starring Clint Walker. And it's an interesting Western, you guys know. I wasn't really into Westerns a few years ago. During my first semester in film school, I took a class that revolved around Westerns, just because of the fact that I didn't know that much about the genre. And I was curious to learn more about it. That's why I'm here in school, to learn stuff. So I took a class on Westerns, watched a lot of Bud Boddicker and things like that. So, I know a little bit more about Western films than I did in the past, but I still haven't, dived into them whatsoever. So this is an interesting film. We follow Clint Walker's character, who goes by the name of Jim Cole. Jim Cole is this ex-sheriff who decides to inherit this land that he had from his father, and he decides to retire from being a sheriff and go live on this homestead. And when he gets there to buy the land, there's a loan on it, and he has to, give up all his savings to get this land. They get to the land, and it's basically a wreck, and it's basically Jim Cole and his family trying to turn this homestead around. And he's with his sheriff that used to be with him, who's a really quirky character. He's your typical drunken sheriff type of character. He's not really that interesting, but he has some, you feel for him when his reveal happens. So they're trying to turn this homestead around. They get some livestock and things like that. He has to sell his gun and his badge and things like that to try and get money to buy, chickens and things like that. He buys these chickens and all this livestock, and things are looking good. And then they are told about this grizzly bear named Satan. Yeah, Satan. And what Satan is this grizzly bear that goes around and wreaks havoc, and all the town folks have tried to kill this grizzly bear and things like that, and they have no success. But Jim Cole's gonna, determined to go out there and kill this grizzly bear. So, he plans his whole films talking about going out. We get this awesome B-roll of this, or awesome, B-roll footage of this grizzly bear, and then it's intertwined with, live footage of this grizzly bear and things like that. And then we get a bounty hunter who's also going after this same bear. And this was a bounty man that Mr. Jim Cole had a run-in with in his old town that he was the sheriff at. And that's basically it. It's just basically trying to defend this Wyoming farm against this grizzly bear. The film for 1966 is interesting. It has some good, family morals like most Westerns do, and it has your typical antagonist versus protagonist type of a mindset, and it has beautiful landscape shots. The landscapes are really, really nice throughout the film, like you would expect from your Western, but overall it's just your basic, typical Western with a grizzly bear as your monster, you would say. And that's about it. And this is a release from Olive. Like I said, they released this film a few years ago. I don't know if it's the same transfer or not, but what's up with that? But, it obviously is. Sorry. It obviously is a new transfer from the Blu-ray that they released a few years ago. I don't know what the differences are, if this transfer is better or what's up with that. But from what I see, the transfer is okay. It's not like a signature new transfer like somebody like Criterion would do. But during the day, the film looks good. It's a lot of bright colors and things like that going on. But once we get nighttime shots, it starts to become a little muddy, and you can't really see that many things going on and things like that. But the release is nice. It comes with a nice slipcase. And it has, a booklet and things like that, as you guys can see on the screen right now. And it has a booklet and some cover art and things like that. So it's clearly that Olive is trying to do a nicer job on their releases. So I'm curious to see where this line goes in the future. Are they going to keep on doing Western films? Because as of now, that seems like a lot of what they're doing. So I don't really know, but we're going to wait and see what they do in the future with these Olive signature releases, if they sell well or what's up with that. But features, we got an auto commentary from a film historian, featurette called Blood and Claw, which is basically like a essay about the film, an interview with Clint Walker, and some archival footage with the world premiere, actually, which is interesting. It's interesting to see those footage from the mid-1960 Hollywood premieres. I think that was really my most interesting special feature on the release. It's interesting. So overall, like I said, we'll see where these go. I hope they release some more interesting films besides Westerns, dive into some of their more obscure horror films, even though they don't have that many really good horror films, but they got some interesting ones. I would love to see like an Invasion of the Body Snatchers type of release with these new Olive signatures, but we'll see where we go. So that is it. That is the review for the Night of the Grizzly. So let's get into the next one. Alright guys, next up we have a film that was sent to me to review by the Criterion Collection. Yes guys, I will now start to review films for the Criterion Collection, which is truly amazing because if you guys know, everything that the Criterion Collection does is amazing, from the artwork to the booklets to the discs to the supplemental features, from the audio to the picture quality. Everything that Criterion does is just absolutely amazing. And the fact that I now have the chance to review their films is just really an honor, to be honest. Being a film snob, going to film school, you watch a lot of films released by Criterion simply because of the fact that they release the best films. And the fact that I now have the chance to review some of these films is just amazing. I'm not trying to kiss ass. It's just a fact. Everybody wants to be Criterion. So this film that I'll be talking about today is a great film to start off the collaboration with Criterion. We'll be talking about Del Toro's film Pan's Labyrinth from the year 2006. If you guys listened to the 22 Shots of Moods and Horror podcast, we remember that we reviewed The Devil's Backbone a few years ago now. I can't believe it was a few years ago, but yes, it was actually a few years ago already. And that film is a great Del Toro film. Everything is amazing. It's an amazing ghost story. The picture quality on that film is just amazing. Criterion did a great job with that release, but it's a really good Civil War ghost tale. And once again, Del Toro now dives right back into the Civil War world, but this time we look at the Spanish Civil War. And back then, 2006, I was a 13-year-old naive self. I actually saw this movie in the theaters, and I was used to watching, crap at the time, because the early 2000s really didn't have that too many good mainstream horror films. This is back when I still wasn't watching a lot of indie horror, even though there wasn't that much good indie horror coming out. I was mainly just watching the stuff that was coming out in mainstream in the theater, and there usually wasn't that much stuff going on at that time. So when this film came out and I saw it in theaters, it just blew my mind. The freaking costumes are amazing in this film, and that's really stands in my mind today. 10 years later, I can't believe this film's 10 years old. 10 years later, that the costumes still hold up in this film, and they look absolutely amazing. And the way that Del Toro was able to transform a bleak period into a bleaker period is just amazing. So, like I said, it takes place at the end of the Spanish Civil War. We follow Ophelia. She's an 11-year-old who is a stepdaughter to a mean son of a bitch general in the Spanish Civil War, and her mother is dying. Her pregnant mother is dying, and basically she comes across this fawn one day in the middle of the woods, and this fawn is giving her this opportunity to try and make her mother better. As the film goes on, we learn more about Ophelia and her mother and this mean son of a bitch stepfather that she has. And in between that, we have these three little fairy tales where Ophelia enters these different worlds trying to get these things that will try and make her mother better. And this is where we have the amazing practical effects. And it's all wrapped around this fawn who is telling Ophelia about these different kind of things that will help her mother make better. And, I know that, that sounds pretty generic, but the way that Del Toro is able to shape this frog and this eyeless creature, which basically just walks around with its eyes to its face, and that's how it walks around. It's just amazing. And at the same time, he talks about history, and that's what was so good about The Devil's Backbone too, is just able to talk about history and intertwining themes of the war with Ophelia's mindset and how she perceives the world, and that's how it is perceived into the monsters and things like that. There's a bunch of subtext that goes on in Ophelia's mind that intertwines with what she sees in the world. But overall, this is just a film that you have to see for yourself. It's hard to really talk about and dive into it. It's a very complex, deep film with amazing costumes and amazing effects. And Criterion, once again, does just a brilliant transfer on. This is a brand new 2K transfer that was supervised by Del Toro, so it's going to be amazing. And the transfer is really, really amazing. And then it has a brand new audio track, which sounds, the same typical Criterion quality. It's really, really fantastic and really, really awesome. And we have some new interviews with Del Toro and the novelist who, came up with the idea of all these different, fairy tales and things like that. And an interview with Doug Jones and for 2007 Making of Documentaries, which talks about the effects and the characters and things like that. Those are really interesting. They were on previous releases and things that you could see before, but they're still really interesting and really cool that they're reported on into here. We have like a notebook. Del Toro's known for making notebooks and things like that, drawings and talking about his experience when he's making the films. And this is on here. It's like an interactive notebook thing where you could click left and right and look at the notebooks and things like that. And then we have, some more things, some additions and some art galleries and things like that. But overall, it's just a fantastic release. And the booklet here is, it's not your typical thick Criterion booklet. It's like a pamphlet, and it opens up and it has your typical essay on the film by a film scholar. And it's an interesting read. It's not my favorite Criterion booklet, but it's still really nice, and you have a bunch of things in there that are interesting to read, like most Criterion booklets. So overall, if you guys like Del Toro And if you're a fan of Pan's Labyrinth, you got to pick up this release by Criterion. It's really, really fantastic, and it's really, really great. So I highly recommend this one. This is Spine number 838. So this is Pan's Labyrinth. That was released by Criterion. You can pick this up now on Blu-ray and DVD. And we'll come back, and we'll be looking at, yet again, another Criterion film, which is another pretty recent film, and we'll get into that in a second. So stay tuned, and I'll talk to you in a second. Stay tuned. All right, everybody. Now we'll be talking about another film that was sent to me to review by the Criterion Collection. And this is a film from the year 2014. And is a film titled Boyhood, directed by the legendary director Richard Linklater, who in my opinion is probably the greatest living American filmmaker of this generation. You know, he's pretty close with Wes Anderson, but when I think of just brilliant American directors who are still, you know, living today, Linklater comes to mind right away. He creates films that revolve around characters and have conversations that so many other directors fail to capture. There's something about just having characters sitting around and talking about life. It's a very hard thing to write. And on top of that, it's just a very hard thing to capture and have audiences intrigued in what you're saying. You just have to write smart, and I think Kevin Smith does a good job with this as well. I think that's why so many people connect with his films as well. Very similar style, and they came up at the same time. But the thing with Boyhood is, I saw this film in 2014 when they were touring it around, and Linklater actually came to Chicago with the film, and I had the opportunity to go and to listen to him talk about this movie. And the fact that he was able to get this made in the first place was just really, really mind-blowing. If you guys don't know the gimmick about this movie, it's basically shot over 12 years. Every 2 weeks, every summer, they would go out and they would shoot another section of this film. And after 12 years, they would finally have a complete and concrete feature-length film. And I just think it shows the genius that Linklater is, that he's able to come up with something that is that far in advance. You don't know what society is going to be like, and you don't know what the things are going to happen throughout these characters' lives. Not even characters, as the actors, you don't know what's going to happen to their lives. And I think everybody's talked about that at this point with this film, that one thing could go wrong and the whole film could be ruined. You could shoot it for 9 years, and then something happens to one of the actors, and you go, oh shit, now what do we do? Our whole film is pretty much ruined. So I think really this is a film that's based on luck and having good producers who really believed in Linklater and what he was trying to tell. And I think the end product is worth it. I don't think it's like one of the best films of this generation that a lot of people really have been talking about, the masterful genius that this film is, but I really just think it's a really great film of watching somebody grow up and trying to come up with a story with that. And it's just the different parts of childhood. I'm about the same age as the main character, Mason, and to see the different things that were going on at the time that these characters were interacting with, I think just was really, really fascinating. And Patricia Arquette and Ethan Hawke does just a really, really great job as the mom and dad, and everything around this project just has to come together perfectly. But like I said, the plot, there isn't really much. It's just this: we follow Mason, who is a little boy at the beginning of the film, and we just watch him grow up and his family struggles between his mom and his dad, who are divorced, and his sister, and all the shit that happens in life, and how these characters deal with the stuff that's happening with their parents and the society around them. There's a lot of political jokes and things like that. So it's interesting in that sense. But, I think the characters' performances really carry the film. And, there's really much more to say about this movie, basically because of the fact that it's a film that you really have to see for yourself. It's not going to be really for everybody. But if you like Linklater, if you like the Before trilogy, which is some of my favorite films, and definitely my go-to films when I want to watch Linklater, then I think that you will like these films. And the fact that he's able to craft interesting conversations, there isn't too much going on in this film besides conversations, just like most Linklater films. You guys know Linklater, he loves to talk about conversations. Conversations. And it's really hard to do. A lot of filmmakers try to make films that revolve around conversations, and a lot of the time, the audiences don't connect to them. But Linklater has something different with him, that he's able to write interesting and intriguing conversations that are able to hold the audience throughout his films. This one is no different. You have to have 12 years of interesting conversations going on, and they really do work. But you guys should check out Boyhood. It's definitely a amazing feat in cinema history. I think that's one of the main reasons you should watch this film, is just because of the fact that it took 12 years to make, and the fact that it was able to come together is just awesome. And this release from Criterion is once again an amazing release. This is a 2-disc set. One disc has the film, and another disc that is just completely features. And this one has a nice thick booklet talking about the film, and you got your typical essay in here by a film scholar, which is quite good. It's an interesting read, and some just awesome pictures and things like that. So, when I saw this film, I knew it was a movie that Criterion was going to end up releasing in the future. Like I said, just because of the fact of its prominence and its importance in the history of cinema. We got a really nice new commentary with Linklater and some of the members that I really think is the main reason to pick up this release. It's a really great commentary. Really interesting to hear him talk about this movie even more, and some of the characters and actors that were in the film talking about their experience and things like that. So, like I said, Boyhood is really a fantastic film. It's not my favorite Linklater, but I really did enjoy it, and I highly recommend that you pick up this version from Criterion. It's definitely the premier way to watch this movie, like everything else, but this was released a few years ago during its initial run, and then this new release by Criterion. It's really nice. The transfer is nice. Everything about it is your typical great Criterion transfer. So that is my review of Richard Linklater's Boyhood. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay tuned, and we'll come back yet again with a final review for this week's show. I hope you guys have been enjoying it. Something a little bit different this time around. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll talk to you guys in a second. All right, welcome back, everybody, for the 4th review in this inaugural episode of Weekly Roundup, where I talk about all the films that I watched throughout the week. And this final review comes from a film that was sent to me by Severin Films, and it is part of their Intervision label, and is a documentary called The Trail of Dracula. And this documentary is basically a really short but compressed documentary about the history of Dracula and vampires, and it basically talks about how Dracula got its start, and through the vampire folklore and all that kind of stuff, and then it goes into Bram Stoker's novel, of course, Nosferatu, and then it goes to the Universal Dracula that talks about Hammer's Dracula, and then it talks about post-Hammer's Dracula and how the character of Dracula is basically never going to go away. And in between that, every era of Dracula, there's like a 10-minute segment dedicated to that, and it talks about all the different Dracula films from that era. So, the first 10 minutes, like I said, is about the folklore of vampires and how vampires are different in each country and things like that, and the different traits of vampires in each different culture and things like that. It's interesting. And then it transitions into Bram Stoker and his novel, and how he was working as a theater manager at the stage in London, and how he was writing the book at the same time, and how the book ultimately came out and it was not a financial success, and unfortunately Bram Stoker died a pretty poor man. And then that transitions into the Nosferatu debacle, and how that film was made extremely popular in Germany. Has a lot of pre-World War One, not pre-World War One. Has a lot of Nazi fears and things like that in it. It's interesting segment about the legal troubles and all that kind of stuff, and then how the film was ordered to be destroyed. And then It was actually destroyed, but like everything, the few prints survived, sent over to the United States, and then the film, exploded to what we know it as it today. And that's an interesting. It's probably my favorite part of the documentary. It's about Nosferatu and all the legal troubles with Bram Stoker's widow, because Bram Stoker died years before the film was actually made, and she had the copyright and all that kind of stuff. And then it gets into Bela Lugosi and how he was Dracula on the stage show, stage version of the novel. And then he wasn't even the first choice for the role when Universal came out and said that they were going to make a screen version, of movie version of Dracula. And then after a while, they finally cast Lugosi, and the movie became, one of the most important horror films ever made. And then we talks about the rest of the sequels and the different Dracula actors who played them and all that kind of stuff. Interesting. Then we get to the Hammer part, and here we have, interviews with Christopher Lee talking about his role in the Hammer Dracula films. And after the third one, he was fed up with playing the character, but then Hammer guilted him into playing the character for, another bunch of movies, because a lot of the crew was the same throughout the entire run of the Hammer Dracula films. So, he didn't want to put all his friends out of work, so he continued making these films, which, do I believe that? A little bit, but I kind of think that, the series made Christopher Lee a world-round star, so I don't think he would have not done the films, but it talks about that, and then we get into post Hammer years and all the modern Dracula films. So, overall, it's a pretty interesting documentary. Like I said, it's compressed. It's only a 63-minute long documentary, so it's not really that long. It doesn't really get into that much in depth about certain eras. It's kind of like a compressed history of each era of the Dracula character. So, if it was probably like a half hour, 20 minutes longer, I think it would probably be a better and well-rounded documentary. But if you want a compressed and concrete history of the Dracula character and vampires in general, then I'd say you should probably check this one out. It's not the greatest documentary, but it's interesting enough, and you could just pop it on for an hour and watch it and learn something. So I have to give it that. I learned some stuff. And basically, all of the other features that we have on here is that we have a 94-minute like Dracula trailer compilations, a bunch of trailers from all these different Dracula films that they talk throughout the documentary. And then we have a documentary or interview with Herzog, who of course directed the Nosferatu remake, which in my opinion, it's definitely in my top 10 greatest films ever made. That movie is just absolutely fantastic. And then we have another interview with Udo Kier, of course, who was Dracula in the Blood for Dracula, directed by Andy Warhol, of course. Then we have a audio interview with Christopher Lee, and that is it. Oh yeah, and an audio interview with a bunch of people from Return of Dracula. So overall, a bunch of bonus features. The trailers are always fun, but it's just your cheap Intervision release. It's not worthy of a Severin full-blown release, but Intervision releases some good stuff, so it's worth the price, if you can find it for cheap, which you probably should be able to. So it's interesting. So that is the first episode of this weekly roundup. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. We reviewed 4 interesting films. Night of the Grizzly, which is, interesting Western. It's not the best Western, but, the main point of that is, of course, the Olive signature collection that they're trying to do. And then we reviewed 2 Criterion films, Pan's Labyrinth and Boyhood, both really, really fantastic films. Really worth the price of admission, as if every Criterion collection release is. And then finally, we rounded this up with an interesting documentary, The Trail of Dracula, which is released by Severin. So overall, hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys like it, I'll probably do some more of these every week. But if you guys don't, just let me know as well, and maybe we'll go back to the other style where I just review every film separately. But I figured this is probably a good way to, like I said, stay fresh on my focal review skills at the same time. save me some time just because I don't have as much time as I used to. So let me know what you guys think. If you guys like them, I'll keep doing them. And yeah, so thanks everybody again for listening and watching. If you guys like this video, of course, as always, you could thumbs up. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/NESRuler22. That's twitter.com/NESRuler22. And as always, go listen to my peeps, JP and Moods over at the 22 Shots of Moods and Horror podcast. I know I talked about that a lot during this first episode. And, you know, they're definitely a huge part of who I am. And I definitely still love Moods and JP. They're still my best friends on the internet and, you know, some of my best friends in general. So go support those guys. They're doing some awesome stuff over there on the show. They got a Italian Horror Month coming up in November, and that is always an interesting month and a series of 4 shows. So if you guys liked it last year, you guys will definitely like it this year. They're doing a whole bunch of more interesting films by Argento and some other Italian directors once again. So go over there and listen to the show. So thank you again, everybody, for listening, and I shall talk to you guys next week with another episode of Weekly Roundup. So I'll talk to you guys soon. See you guys later.